Ethan Carter was 42, the kind of man who'd spend his life fixing what other people broke, bridges, roads, even broken promises at least once or twice. His fiancée, Rachel Moore, 39, was sunshine wrapped in silk, warm laughter, soft eyes, the kind of woman who made him believe maybe he hadn't wasted all those years working late and waking up alone. They'd met at a charity gala 3 years back. Rachel had spilled red wine on his shirt, laughed too loud at his awkward jokes, and danced barefoot under the string lights when the band played their last song. People liked to say they were opposites, but the truth was simpler. Ethan needed someone to remind him life was bigger than invoices and poured concrete. Rachel needed someone solid when the wind blew too hard. So when Ethan got down on one knee last winter in front of her parents' house, Rachel cried so beautifully he felt every tired cell in his body wake up again. They set the date for June. A garden wedding, soft jazz under the oaks, her father's prized vintage car for the getaway. Ethan threw himself into the planning like it was another project to engineer to perfection. Every flower, every menu tasting, every small detail Rachel dreamed up. But somewhere in the middle of the cake tastings and the seating charts, the cracks began to show. Not big ones, small hairline fractures that only someone like Ethan, trained to see fault lines, could spot. At first, it was her phone. She'd always been a little glued to it. Pinterest boards, wedding group chats, mom calling about the guest list. But this was different. She started taking calls in the bathroom, late at night, whispering behind the door while he pretended to sleep. When he asked, she'd wave it off. Just Tessa. She's freaking out about her maid of honor dress. Or, mom wants to change the flowers again. And Ethan, so good at fixing things, kept telling himself he was imagining it. Then there were the errands. She'd vanish for hours on days he thought they'd spend together, coming back with a bottle of wine and a guilty kiss on his cheek. Once, she'd forgotten to remove a second receipt from the bag. Men's cologne. He told himself it was a gift for him, though she never gave it to him. At night, Ethan lay awake with Rachel's head on his chest, her hair spread like silk against his skin. He told himself he was paranoid, that he was the problem, that love required trust. He wanted to trust her so badly it hurt. And yet, deep down he knew. Engineers know stress when they see it. And Rachel, for all her pretty laughter, was cracking somewhere he couldn't reach. Still, he kept a smile on his face. He poured the champagne, toasted the coming forever. He told his mother Rachel was the best thing that ever happened to him. He didn't know that in 10 days, he'd be standing in an altar, watching his whole life split open in front of everyone he loved. The week before the wedding was a swirl of ribbon and crystal glasses and relatives flying in from 3 states. Ethan's mother moved into their guest room to help Rachel keep her feet on the ground. She fussed over tablecloths while Rachel slipped outside for a breath of air that always turned into 30 minutes on her phone, facing the garden gate like she was waiting for someone to walk through it. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. But every time he caught her eye, Rachel flashed him that soft, easy smile, the same one that melted him when he proposed. It made him doubt himself, made him feel small for wondering if the woman he'd trusted with his name, his house, his mother's favorite ring, could ever betray him. On Thursday, Rachel's father hosted a rehearsal dinner at a little Italian place by the lake. White candles, long tables, Ethan's cousins shoulder to shoulder with Rachel's sorority friends, laughter echoing off the old wood beams. And in the middle of it all, Brandon Hughes, Ethan's oldest friend and best man, slid in late, cheeks flushed from the cold night air. Brandon had been with Ethan since college. The two of them built Carter and Hughes contracting from scratch. They were brothers in every way but blood. Nights sleeping on job site floors, beers poured over triumphs and failures alike. Brandon was the one who'd told Ethan to ask Rachel out when he hesitated that first month. If you don't, I will, he joked, nudging him toward courage. So when Brandon squeezed in next to Rachel at the table that night, whispering something that made her laugh too quickly, Ethan forced himself to smile. Of course they were close. She was about to marry into their circle. It made sense. It made sense. But later, while his mother lectured him about double-checking the weather forecast for the big day, Ethan's eyes drifted down the table. Brandon's hand rested behind Rachel's chair. Too close, too casual, knuckles brushing silk. Rachel leaned in when she thought no one was watching. Her smile slipped into something else, something secret, and then just as quickly flicked back when she caught Ethan's gaze. It made his heart squeeze tight enough to steal his breath. He spent the rest of the dinner forcing small talk, counting down the minutes until he could get her alone. But when he offered to drive her home, Rachel kissed his cheek and said she'd ride with Tessa instead. Girl talk, you know. She laughed like it was nothing. Ethan watched the taillights fade into the night, Brandon's truck pulling out just a few cars behind. He told himself he was tired, overthinking, cold feet like everyone said. But deep in his chest, a crack widened, whispering that he already knew the truth, and that the truth was about to ruin them all. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, a quiet that felt thick like wet concrete waiting to set around his chest. Rachel wasn't there. She'd texted him an hour after she left the dinner, staying over at Tessa's. "Too much wine, babe. Love you." The word sat on his screen like a taunt. He could picture her curled on Tessa's couch, giggling over old photos. But when he called, it rang once, then went straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. What would he even say? "Hey, just checking that you're not lying in someone else's bed?" The thought made him sick. At 2 a.m., Ethan sat in the kitchen with his laptop open, pretending to review contracts for a downtown parking structure that didn't need his attention. His eyes drifted to their wedding folder, RSVPs, invoices for flowers, and a jazz quartet Rachel insisted on. He scrolled through the checklist she'd made on their shared drive, each line a promise she'd made him. Forever. Only you. Trust me. He closed the laptop when he caught himself rereading the same line for the 10th time. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "Trust her, Ethan. You always second-guess people too much. That's why you're alone so long." He believed her. He wanted to believe her so badly he'd convinced himself his gut was wrong. But that gut, the same instinct that saved him from signing bad contracts and shady deals, now kept whispering the same thing. Look closer. Don't be the fool. By 3 a.m., the coffee pot was empty, and so was his resolve to pretend. He pulled on a jacket, keys rattling in his hand, and slipped out the door like a thief. Tessa's apartment was 15 minutes away. He drove like a ghost, headlights cutting through a sleeping town. Every red light felt like a test of his nerve. What was he hoping to find? Rachel asleep on a couch, or Rachel awake somewhere she shouldn't be? He parked across the street from the dim, brick building. Tessa's top-floor light was on, a soft, flickering glow. Maybe the TV, or maybe Rachel, curled up with a blanket in bad reality shows, just like she'd said. Ethan sat there gripping the steering wheel, heart banging so loud it muffled the hum of his idling engine. Part of him wanted to start the car and drive home, to bury this in the same place he hid every doubt. But the other part, the part that built bridges strong enough to carry whole cities, knew that cracks don't fix themselves. He got out, shut the door gently, and crossed the street toward the truth waiting in that little circle of light. The hallway outside Tessa's apartment smelled faintly of takeout and stale perfume. Ethan stood there for a second, listening. Muffled laughter leaked through the door. Two voices, not just one. He recognized Rachel's, that soft, musical lilt that had once made him believe he'd finally found home. But the second voice, he didn't want to recognize it. He hoped he was wrong. He knocked, gently at first, then harder when the laughter stopped short. A moment later, the door cracked open, spilling warm light onto his shoes. Tessa blinked at him, mascara smudged, cheeks pink from wine or embarrassment, maybe both. "Ethan, what are you doing here? It's so late." He didn't answer. Over her shoulder, his eyes found Rachel curled up on the couch in an oversized t-shirt, but not alone. Brandon was there too, half turned away, glass in hand. The bottle of whiskey on the coffee table told him enough. Rachel froze when she saw him, her smile snapping off her face like a branch in a storm. "Ethan," she said, voice too sweet, too practiced. "Baby, what are you?" He stepped past Tessa before she could stop him, boots sinking into the old carpet. His eyes locked with Brandon's, his best man, his business partner, the man who once swore loyalty over cheap beers and half-finished blueprints. "Long night?" Ethan asked, his voice calm in a way that scared even him. Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Brandon shifted on the couch, looking anywhere but Ethan's eyes. "It's not what you think," Rachel said too fast. "We were just what?" Ethan asked, having a drink. At 3 in the morning? After sneaking out of our rehearsal dinner. Silence. Tessa cleared her throat but shrank back when Ethan turned to her. Not angry, just tired. So tired. Brandon finally spoke. Look, man, it's nothing. We were just talking, about the wedding, about you. Ethan laughed, a low, bitter sound that startled Rachel into flinching. About me? My fiancée and my best friend. Talking. Behind my back. At 3 in the damn morning. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. The truth sat in the room like a fresh crack in a concrete wall. Undeniable, spreading, ready to bring the whole thing down. Rachel reached for him, but he stepped back. Her fingers brushed empty air. The man she promised forever to was suddenly an ocean away, and she could see it in his eyes. Ethan turned to Brandon, who opened his mouth to explain, but Ethan cut him off with a look sharp enough to slice skin. You want to finish this? Ethan said quietly. Good. Let's finish it in front of everyone. And with that, he turned and walked out of Tessa's apartment, leaving the door open behind him. He didn't care who closed it. Didn't care what they whispered when he was gone. Because come tomorrow, when the flowers were set and the guests were waiting, he'd tear the lie wide open for everyone to see. Ethan drove home with the window down, the cold air biting at his face, keeping him awake when every muscle in his body wanted to shut down. The city slid past him in blurs of yellow streetlights and closed storefronts. His phone buzzed twice in the passenger seat. Rachel's name again, and then silence. He didn't answer. He wanted to hear her excuses as much as he wanted to slam his hand in a door. By the time he pulled into the driveway, dawn was a thin bruise on the horizon. He sat in the parked car staring at the house they'd picked out together. The front porch she wanted for morning coffees, the garden they'd never planted. He wondered if she'd come back here tonight, slip into their bed like nothing happened. Inside, his mother's old clock ticked loud in the hallway. Ethan dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, like always, as if routine could hold the cracks together for just one more hour. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat at the dining table surrounded by stacks of wedding favors and handwritten place cards Rachel had fussed over for weeks. He picked one up, Brandon Hughes, best man. He laughed then, a single, sharp bark that bounced off the walls. Best man. The irony tasted bitter in his throat. At 7 a.m., his mother patted him wearing her robe, hair pinned up, eyes still soft with sleep. She paused when she saw him, the look on his face, the mess of cards spread around him like the ruins of a celebration that hadn't even begun. Ethan? Honey, what are you doing up? She asked. He didn't look at her right away. Didn't want her to see the storm behind his eyes just yet. Nothing, Mom. Couldn't sleep. She moved closer, her mother's radar already buzzing. Is it the nerves? Cold feet. It's normal, Ethan almost laughed again. Cold feet. If only it were that simple. He wanted to tell her everything. How the woman she'd welcomed into the family was cheating on him with a man she called practically his son. But he swallowed it down for now. Yeah, he said instead, voice flat. Nerves. His mother kissed the top of his head, smoothing his hair like she had when he was 10 and scared of thunderstorms. It'll all work out, sweetheart. You and Rachel, you're meant for this. He almost told her then, almost ripped the bandage off. But instead, he nodded and watched her shuffle off to make coffee, humming some old tune under her breath. The lie tasted like metal on his tongue. But by tonight, it wouldn't be his secret anymore. Because if Rachel wanted a perfect wedding, Ethan would give her one she'd never forget. The day of the wedding dawned bright and sharp, the kind of perfect weather Rachel had prayed for. Blue sky, no wind to ruin hair or blow away petals. Ethan stood at the bedroom window, watching the neighborhood wake up, sunlight spilling across manicured lawns and trimmed hedges, the kind of normal that mocked the chaos, cracking him apart inside. Downstairs, his mother and Rachel's mother were bustling in the kitchen. He could hear laughter, clinking mugs, the smell of fresh coffee drifting up the stairs. It all felt like a stage set for a show that no one knew was about to collapse. His suit hung on the closet door, navy blue, tailored just for him. Rachel had chosen the tie, silver silk, a soft match to the pale blue flowers she'd picked for her bouquet. Something borrowed, something blue. How quaint. A knock on the door snapped him out of the spiral. Brandon's voice floated through, too casual for the storm Ethan knew was coming. Hey man, you ready? Carl be here in 20. Big day, huh? Big day. Ethan almost smiled at the words, so thin and useless now. He opened the door slowly, met Brandon's eyes, the same eyes that once promised loyalty over shots of cheap whiskey and dusty back row jobs. Brandon grinned, clapped him on the shoulder like they were still boys. Don't look so serious. You're about to marry the love of your life. Nerves are normal, huh? Ethan held his gaze, searching for any flicker of guilt. There was nothing. Brandon's smile didn't falter, didn't twitch. He'd perfected the mask, the same one Rachel wore so easily now. I'm good, Ethan said softly. You ready? Born ready. Let's get you hitched, brother. Brother. The word tasted rotten in Ethan's mouth. They drove to the venue together, an old converted barn on the edge of town, all weathered wood and fairy lights and rows of white chairs that cost more than Ethan liked to think about. Rachel had wanted rustic charm. Ethan had wanted Rachel to be happy, so he gave her everything. The groomsmen were already there when they arrived, fussing with ties, swapping jokes to kill the nerves. Ethan stood off to the side, phone buzzing in his pocket. Rachel's name, again and again. He didn't answer. He didn't need to hear her voice. Not yet. The wedding planner bustled up, clipboard in hand, beaming. Ethan, you look so handsome. We're on schedule. Rachel's finishing up her makeup. She's glowing, darling. Just wait till you see her. Ethan forced a polite nod. Oh, I'll see her, he thought. I'll see every last piece of what she's been hiding. The planner flitted away. Brandon leaned in, voice low, as if conspiratorial. Nervous? Hey, it's normal, man. Just breathe. In a few hours, we'll be drunk and laughing about all this. Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, we will. Brandon slapped his back, then drifted off to joke with the others. Ethan watched him go, the secret between them swelling like a bruise under skin. The barn door creaked open. Guests were arriving. Family, old friends, neighbors who still remembered Ethan as the kid who mowed their lawns for pocket money. They found their seats under strings of white lights, oblivious to the fuse burning down under their feet. And Rachel, somewhere behind the barn doors, slipping into the dress Ethan had paid for, fixing her hair while the knife she'd buried in his back waited to be pulled out in front of everyone. Today, she'd get the spotlight she craved, but the script would be his. Ethan slipped away from the hum of laughter and the smell of fresh-cut flowers, ducking into a side corridor where the warm light gave way to cool shadows. He needed a moment, a breath that wasn't laced with fake smiles and backslaps from people who didn't know they were sitting on a bomb. He could hear Rachel's voice from the bridal suite at the end of the hall, muffled through the door but unmistakable. She was laughing, high and sweet, the same laugh she'd used on him when they first met at New Year's party 9 years ago. Back then, he thought it was the most honest sound in the world. He leaned against the wall, eyes closed, fingers tapping his thigh. Part of him wanted to kick the door in, drag her out by the lie she called love. But another part, the part that knew how people remembered moments, wanted to be precise, wanted to watch the truth come apart in slow motion, so everyone saw exactly who she really was. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another text from Rachel. Can't wait to see you, my love. Counting the minutes. My love. He almost laughed out loud. He imagined Brandon's hands on her, imagined them plotting behind his back while she typed these sweet nothings. His stomach flipped, but he forced it down. No more imagining. He would see it all today. From inside the suite, Rachel's voice drifted closer. She was near the door now, maybe checking her hair in the full-length mirror she'd insisted on renting. He heard Tessa's laugh too. Loyal Tessa, the one who'd sworn she knew nothing. He pushed himself off the wall, forced his face back into neutral, and knocked. There was a beat of silence. Then Rachel's voice, syrupy through the wood. Who is it? It's me, Ethan said. A rustle, a click, and the door cracked open. Rachel's face appeared, radiant in soft white silk, curls pinned perfectly. For a second, Ethan had to remind himself what she'd done, how easily she'd carved out a piece of him and handed it to Brandon in the dark. Ethan. She opened the door wider, her eyes wide with fake surprise. You can't see me before the ceremony, baby. It's bad luck. He studied her face, every line of it. I wanted to see you anyway. She giggled, an actress playing innocent. Well, you shouldn't. You'll ruin it. He reached out, brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. She leaned into the touch like nothing was wrong, like the whole house of cards wasn't trembling. It's already ruined, Rachel, he whispered, low enough that Tessa, standing awkwardly behind her with a curling iron in hand, couldn't hear. Rachel's smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, but then it was back, the mask snapping into place. "You're being weird," she teased, poking his chest lightly. "Go on. Go wait for me at the altar, handsome." He stepped back, gave her a nod. "I'll be there." And he would be, waiting, watching the lies come undone under fairy lights and violin music. When he turned away, he could feel her eyes on his back, and for the first time, he hoped she felt a shiver of something cold and sharp run down her spine. Because the truth was coming, and Rachel would have nowhere to hide. Ethan stepped out into the crisp air behind the barn. A few stray guests milled about the garden, snapping photos of the flower arch Rachel had obsessed over for months. He barely noticed them. His mind was already unspooling what had to happen next. He needed one more piece, undeniable proof. The texts were buried in Rachel's phone, but he needed Brandon's fingerprints on this too, something no one could talk their way out of. He spotted Brandon near the catering tent, leaning against the table, chatting up one of the waitresses, all easy charm and careless laughs. Ethan took a moment to study him. The way he smiled, like he'd earned the world just for showing up. The same grin Ethan had trusted when they'd signed their first business deal in an empty garage 5 years ago. Brandon saw him and waved him over. "Man of the hour," he called, clapping Ethan on the shoulder when he got close. "Ready to seal the deal? Rachel's glowing today, huh?" Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, glowing." He motioned for Brandon to follow him behind the tent, away from curious eyes and phone cameras. Brandon raised an eyebrow, but went along, laughing as if this was just another dumb prank between old friends. "What's up? You look like you haven't slept in a week," Brandon said once they were out of sight. He pulled out a flask, the same battered flask they'd passed back and forth behind high school bleachers, and offered it. Ethan ignored it. "You got a minute?" Ethan asked, voice low but steady. "I need to ask you something." Brandon leaned back against a stack of chairs, cocky and relaxed. "Sure. Shoot." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He'd saved the old messages Rachel had forgotten to delete from their shared tablet, screenshots that showed just enough. He held the phone up, let Brandon see the blurry lines of text and Rachel's name glowing at the top. Brandon's grin slipped, just a fraction. He pushed off the chairs, trying to grab the phone, but Ethan stepped back. "Easy," Ethan said. "I'm not here to fight you." Brandon scoffed, voice sharp. "What is this, man? You snooping through her stuff now? You think you got it all figured out?" Ethan's eyes didn't blink. "Did you love her? Or was it just the money? Be honest with me, Brandon. One last time." Brandon let out a cold laugh that died too quick. He wiped a hand over his mouth, glancing back toward the barn where laughter drifted on the wind. "It was never about love, Ethan. You know that. She's bored. You work too much. She wanted more. I gave her more. And yeah, maybe I thought we'd take a slice of the pie on the way out. There it was. Plain. Ugly. Real." Ethan's hand didn't shake as he lowered the phone. "Thanks for clearing that up." Brandon stepped closer, voice dropping to a hiss. "What are you gonna do, huh? Blow it all up? We both know you don't have it in you." Ethan held his stare for one long heartbeat. "Watch me." He turned on his heel, leaving Brandon standing in the shade, flask dangling forgotten in his hand. Ethan could feel the truth pressing against his ribs like a caged thing. Today, the truth would get out, with no room left for Rachel or Brandon to run. Ethan slipped back inside the barn through the side door, the noise of laughter and soft violin music washing over him like a wave he no longer belonged to. Every familiar face, his cousins, Rachel's aunts fussing with corsages, his father greeting distant relatives, all of them wrapped in a lie he was about to shred open. He moved through them like a ghost, offering a tight smile here, a nod there, never stopping long enough for the small talk that used to come so easily. His mother caught his eye near the drink table, her face soft with pride and worry. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" she asked, reaching out to straighten his boutonniere. "You look pale." Ethan forced his mouth to move. "I'm good, Mom. Just a lot on my mind." She squeezed his arm. "She loves you so much, Ethan. Don't forget that." He almost laughed, but it stuck in his throat like a splinter. "She loves you. Sure, in her own crooked way." He pulled away gently and made his way toward the little alcove behind the stage where the DJ was setting up. He needed a minute alone, somewhere quiet to let the plan settle in his head. He'd rehearsed it 1,000 times in the dead hours of the night when sleep refused to come. He'd speak before the vows. He'd stand there under that stupid canopy draped in fairy lights and call Brandon forward, his best man. He'd show everyone the texts. Maybe he'd even play the voicemail Rachel had left Brandon by mistake. Her voice sickly sweet, whispering how they'd run away once the rings were on her finger. Ethan's stomach twisted. Part of him still wanted to disappear, drive away, leave this mess behind, but another part burned with something darker. If they'd stolen years from him, the least they could do was watch him take his pound of flesh in front of everyone they'd fooled. He pulled his phone out again, reading the screenshots one more time like a man tracing old scars. The words blurred for a moment, his eyes stinging. He blinked it back. No tears today. Not for her. Not for him. A shadow fell over him. He looked up to see his cousin Jake, tall and broad-shouldered, grinning like they were still teenagers sneaking beers behind the garage. "Hey man, you hiding back here? Rachel's been asking for you. She's about ready." Ready? Ethan wondered if she had any idea what was coming. Maybe she did. Maybe that's why she'd been so sweet this morning. Why her eyes kept darting away when she smiled at him. He forced a shrug. Just needed a breather. Jake clapped him on the back, oblivious. "Well, come on. Time to go be the happiest man alive, huh?" Ethan pocketed his phone. "Yeah," he said, voice calm. "Time to be happy." He stepped back into the glow of the main hall, guests rising from their seats as the music shifted to the processional. Rachel's mother dabbed at her eyes. Brandon stood near the altar, posture too casual, too smug for a man who just admitted to gutting his best friend's life. Ethan moved down the aisle to his mark, every step anchoring him deeper in the storm he was about to unleash. The doors at the back swung open. There she was, Rachel in white satin and lace, veil trailing behind her like a ghost. She looked beautiful. She looked exactly like a dream. But dreams end, and this one would end under the lights, with every eye watching. The soft notes of the wedding march floated through the air as Rachel stepped forward, arm hooked through her father's, her smile blinding to anyone who didn't know what it cost him. Ethan's heart beat steady and slow, a drum counting down to detonation. Guests leaned in, murmuring about how stunning she looked, how lucky he was. He caught snippets. Perfect couple, match made in heaven. If only they knew they were watching the grand finale of a fairy tale gone rotten. Rachel's eyes met his halfway down the aisle. She searched his face for a crack, any sign he'd figured it out. But Ethan gave her nothing, just a calm, unreadable mask she'd never seen before. Her smile twitched, a flicker of doubt rippling under the veil. Her father handed her off with a kiss on her cheek and a clap on Ethan's shoulder. "Take care, my girl." Ethan nearly laughed at that. "Your girl's been everyone's but mine." He nodded instead. They stood there, side by side, under the arch of flowers Rachel had chosen, the same arch Ethan would rip apart in minutes. She slipped her hand into his, her grip too tight, knuckles whitening like she was trying to hold something together with pure force. The officiant began his gentle welcome speech, voice warm and practiced. Guests settled in, phones hidden away, eyes locked on the perfect couple ready to promise forever. Ethan barely heard the words. He was watching Brandon. Brandon stood to his left, smiling just a little too wide, his eyes flitting between Rachel and Ethan like he was counting down to his getaway. His hand rested inside his jacket pocket, probably fingers drumming over the plane tickets, the cash Rachel had helped him siphon from Ethan's trust. Ethan almost pitied him. Almost. "Speak now, or forever hold your peace," the officiant intoned. Perfect, Ethan thought. What a gift of a line. He raised his free hand, stopping the officiant mid-sentence. A ripple of confusion spread through the rows. Rachel's grip on his fingers turned clammy. "Actually," Ethan said, voice clear and cutting through the hush, "I do have something to say before we go any further." Rachel's head snapped toward him. Her eyes darted past him to Brandon. A flicker so fast only Ethan saw it. A tiny tremor in her perfect mask. "Ethan," she hissed under her breath, forcing a smile for the crowd. "What are you doing?" He turned to the guests. His mother, wide-eyed and confused, his father leaning forward, whispers fluttering like moths in the rafters. And then he looked at Brandon, who finally looked like he was choking on that smug grin. "I just want to share a little story," Ethan said, stepping forward, hands slipping from Rachel's frozen grasp. "About loyalty." about trust, and about how the people you love the most can be the ones who gut you when you're not looking. Rachel's lips moved, "Don't." But she had no power here anymore. Ethan pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the folder marked insurance. The hush thickened. Guests glanced at each other. A collective breath held. "Sit tight, everyone," Ethan said, calm as glass about a break. "You're going to want to hear this." A hush fell so heavy over the hall that Ethan could hear the faint buzz of the fairy lights above them. Rachel's breath hitched beside him, her veil trembling with the tiny quiver of her jaw. Brandon shifted his weight behind Ethan, but didn't move closer. Not yet. Maybe he still thought he could spin this, talk it away, laugh it off. Ethan lifted his phone for everyone to see, the screen bright under the soft golden lights. He turned it to the crowd, to his family, Rachel's family, the old neighbors who'd come with casseroles and congratulations. Their eyes clung to that phone like it was about to explode. And in a way it was. "This," Ethan said evenly, "is what betrayal looks like when you're too stupid to delete your secrets." Rachel reached for his arm, her smile a ghastly mask. "Honey, don't do this here, please." He stepped away before she could touch him again. "You don't get to ask me for anything now." A few guests shifted in their seats, a hush of whispers like wind through dry grass. Ethan tapped the screen. An audio file flickered to life. Rachel's voice, unmistakable, intimate, a softness she'd never used on him. "Just get the wire transfers done before the ceremony. He'll never know. We'll leave tonight, okay? I promise. I love you." Brandon's face dropped all the way to ash. A few people gasped. Rachel lunged for the phone, but Ethan stepped back again, his voice rising just enough to cover her frantic whisper. "And if the recording's not enough," Ethan said, "there's the texts. Hundreds of them. The bank statements. The cash you siphoned from our accounts, Rachel. The fake invoices Brandon slipped through my business. The flight's booked for tomorrow morning." Rachel spun on Brandon, eyes wide with raw betrayal, like he was the problem now that they were cornered. "You were supposed to erase everything," she hissed. Brandon stepped back, palms up. "You think I had time for all your mess?" He found it. "Rachel, it's over." Ethan's mother rose from her chair, hand to her mouth, tears brimming. Rachel's father stood too, staring at his daughter like he didn't know her at all. The officiant, poor man, hovered near the arch with his book clutched to his chest, trapped in a nightmare he hadn't signed up for. Ethan turned to Rachel one last time. Her eyes were wild now, glittering with fury and desperation. He leaned close enough for only her to hear. "You could have asked me for anything," he said, voice raw but steady. "You didn't have to gut me like this." And then, louder, to everyone, "This wedding is off. Enjoy the cake. You've earned it." He dropped the phone onto the rose petal aisle and walked away. Behind him, the room erupted, a swell of gasps, broken whispers. Rachel's sharp sob as she dropped to her knees, scrambling after pieces of her ruined lie. But Ethan didn't look back. Not once. The door swung shut behind him, and the chill outside tasted better than the sweetest vow ever could. Outside, the sky was still too bright for the ruin Ethan felt in his chest. A breeze picked at his hair as he stepped away from the barn, leaving behind the stunned hush and rising murmur of shocked family, gossiping cousins, and the sudden crash of Rachel's sobs colliding with Brandon's desperate excuses. Ethan didn't slow down. He moved past the rows of parked cars, gravel crunching under his dress shoes. For a moment, he wondered if he looked like a runaway groom. Bow ties slightly undone, phone gone, ring still heavy in his pocket. But he wasn't running. Not really. He'd stayed long enough to torch the lie. That was enough for today. He reached his car, an old black sedan that still smelled faintly of motor oil and stale coffee. He slid inside, shut the door, and let the silence hold him. His hands shook for the first time all day, not with regret, but with the leftover adrenaline of holding himself together long enough to say what needed to be said. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He'd forgotten about the backup one, the one Rachel didn't know about, the one he'd used to gather every screenshot, every file, every recording. A message from Jake. "Where did you go? Are you okay?" Ethan let the phone drop onto the passenger seat. He didn't know how to answer that yet. Through the windshield, he could see the barn's warm glow, the fairy lights Rachel had ordered strung over the garden, still twinkling like some stubborn lie. Somewhere in there, His mother was probably trying to explain the unexplainable to relatives who'd flown in from 3 states away. Somewhere, Rachel was crying. For herself, not for him. And Brandon was probably already figuring out who else he could fool next. Ethan breathed out slowly, feeling the ghost of the ring in his pocket. He pulled it out, rolled it between his fingers. The symbol of forever she'd traded for stolen money and an affair with a man who would have left her as soon as the bank account was dry. He opened the glove compartment, dropped the ring inside, and shut it like closing a coffin. It was over, and he was still here. The car key turned in the ignition with a comforting rumble. Maybe he'd go to his brother's place by the lake, sit on the dock, drink cheap beer, let the cold water and darker sky wash out the taste of betrayal. Maybe he'd tell no one where he was for a few days. He pulled out of the lot, gravel spraying behind him, headlights sweeping over the congratulations banner that flapped weakly in the wind. The last symbol of the day that was never real. And as the barn lights shrank in the rearview mirror, Ethan realized something. The future could hurt, but it could also be clean, free, and his, fully his for the first time in years. Ethan drove with the windows cracked open, letting the night air wash through the car like a blessing. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, he felt the knots in his chest loosen. Not gone, but softer. Each mile put distance between him and the barn strung with lights and lies. His phone buzzed again, another message. This one from his mother. Come home. Please. Let's talk. He loved her too much to ignore it, but not enough to drive back into that circus right now. He needed air, stars, silence. He needed to remember who he was before Rachel, and Brandon hollowed him out. The old highway curved out past town toward the reservoir, and he followed on instinct. That stretch of water had been his escape since he was a kid. The first place he went with his dad's fishing pole. The first place he kissed a girl under the weightless hush of falling leaves. When he pulled up to the gravel shoulder near the dock, the parking lot was empty. Good. No questions here. No pitying glances. No buzz of gossip traveling faster than the engine could outrun it. He stepped out and stretched, rolling his shoulders, breathing in the pine and the chill coming off the water. In the dark, the lake looked endless. Just a sheet of black glass reflecting a sky too wide to hold anything as petty as betrayal. He walked down the old wooden dock, boards creaking under his dress shoes. Halfway down, he sat, dangling his legs over the edge like he had as a boy, Tuck's pants rumpled and a loose thread catching the wind. For a while he did nothing, just listened to the lapping of the water, the hush of trees, his own pulse finally slowing. And when he felt steady enough, he took out the second phone again. He read the messages from Jake, from his mother, even a single one from Rachel that had slipped through. Please, Ethan, talk to me. He laughed, one sharp breath that turned into a sigh. Talk to you? He had nothing left to say that wasn't already carved into the wreckage of the day. He hovered over her message for a second. Then, with one flick, he deleted the thread. No more looking back. His chest felt lighter. Not whole. Not yet. But lighter. A single car rolled past on the highway behind him, headlights sweeping through the trees and gone in a heartbeat. Ethan let the echo fade before he spoke out loud. To no one at all. I'm done, he said to the lake, to the stars, to the ring still locked in the glove box. I'm done. And for the first time that night, he believed it. Ethan sat on that dock long enough for the night to press in close, wrapping him in a hush that asked nothing of him. No vows, no questions, just the gentle slap of water against wood and the distant chorus of frogs and crickets hidden in the brush. He checked his watch. It was well past midnight. Somewhere behind him, the town would still be humming with rumors. His phone vibrated on the dock beside him. He didn't even bother looking this time. Whoever was could wait. He'd waited long enough for everyone else. A memory drifted up, uninvited. Rachel, 5 years ago, barefoot in his kitchen, laughing as she burned the toast on purpose just to see him smile. Back then he thought they'd build everything together. The house, the family, the story worth telling at anniversaries. He hadn't known that one day she'd twist that laughter into a secret. Ethan closed his eyes, let the cold breeze drag that memory away like smoke. He couldn't change what she'd done, but he could decide what pieces of her he'd keep. And tonight, he'd keep none. He stood and stretched, his muscles stiff from sitting in the same spot too long. He should call Jake back, he thought. Or maybe his mom. But first he needed to break the last tie that still dug under his skin like a splinter. Back at the car, he opened the glove box. The ring sat there, dull under the dashboard light. A promise turned to poison. He turned it over in his palm, feeling its weight, the cool bite of the metal against his skin. He could pawn it, sell it, bury it somewhere in the woods. But none of that felt right. Instead, he pocketed it and walked back to the dock. The lake waited, patient, wide, old enough to swallow secrets without leaving a ripple. Ethan drew back his arm and flung the ring as far as he could. It sailed through the dark, a tiny arc of silver under the moon before it hit the water with a soft splash. No fanfare, no final word. Just gone. He watched the ripples smooth out, the glass surface reclaiming itself, pretending nothing had ever disturbed it. When he turned back to his car, Ethan felt something inside him settle. Not healed, but freer. He'd kept his dignity when Rachel sold hers. He'd chosen truth when she chose a lie. And for once, that was enough. As the car engine rumbled to life, Ethan knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow wouldn't be about her anymore. Tomorrow was his again. By the time Ethan pulled onto the empty two-lane road back toward town, the sky had begun its quiet shift, that deep, dark blue that comes just before dawn. He drove slowly, no rush to reach anywhere, the hum of tires on asphalt almost soothing after the storm he'd walked through tonight. In the cup holder, his backup phone buzzed again. This time he checked it. A single new message from Jake. "Mom's worried, sick. Come by if you want. Doors open." For a moment, Ethan thought about just driving aimlessly until the sun burned away every shadow in his mind. But then he pictured his mom in her little kitchen, pacing the floor in her robe, worrying about a son she'd raised to believe in loyalty, and who'd had it thrown back at him in the worst way. He turned off the main road and headed for the old neighborhood instead. The streets were still, the houses familiar, unchanged, a row of memories stitched together with picket fences and porch lights left on for someone coming home late. Jake's place looked exactly like Ethan remembered. Half-finished garden beds, a dent in the mailbox from when they were teenagers, and used it for batting practice. He pulled in behind Jake's truck, cut the engine, and sat for a moment just listening to the ticking metal cool. Before he could second-guess it, he got out and walked up the path. The porch light flicked on as he stepped onto the stoop. The door swung open before he knocked. Jake stood there, barefoot in sweatpants and a ratty college sweatshirt, hair a mess, eyes sharp with worry that turned to relief the second he saw Ethan. "Jesus, man," Jake said, pulling him in without waiting. "I've been calling you for hours." Ethan let himself be pulled into the warmth, into the old smell of cheap coffee and wood floors and leftover pizza. Home, in a way Rachel's house had never really been. He didn't say much at first. He didn't need to. Jake just stood there, hand on his shoulder, nodding like he could shoulder the whole weight with him. After a minute, Jake guided him to the couch. He pushed a cold beer into Ethan's hand, 4 a.m. therapy in a bottle, and dropped next to him with a heavy sigh. "Want to talk about it?" Jake asked. Ethan stared at the label, thumb tracing the rim. Then he nodded, not because he wanted to relive it, but because speaking it out loud made it real, made it smaller somehow. And Jake was safe. Jake had always been safe. So Ethan opened his mouth and let it all spill. The texts, the fake invoices, the second phone, the barn full of lies he'd burned down with nothing but his voice. By the time he was done, the sky outside the window was warming into the first flush of morning. When Ethan finally fell silent, the sun had cracked the horizon, washing Jake's small living room in pale gold. Outside, birds argued over the feeder like nothing in the world had changed, and maybe for them, it hadn't. But for Ethan, everything was different. Jake sat forward, elbows on his knees, listening the way he always had. No judgment, no interruptions, just that steady presence that made Ethan feel less alone. When Ethan stopped talking, Jake didn't rush to fill the silence. He let it breathe, like a good friend should. Finally, Jake cleared his throat. "So, what now?" he asked, voice low, like they were kids again, whispering secrets that might break if spoken too loud. Ethan huffed a quiet laugh, rubbed a hand over his tired face. "I don't know. I really don't. The house is hers, technically. The ring's at the bottom of the lake. I guess start over." Jake leaned back, nodding. "You can stay here as long as you need." Mom wants you home too, you know. Yeah, I'll see her soon, Ethan said. He felt it. That tug to go hug her, smell her garden soap, and hear her say, "I'm proud of you," like she always did when he brought home good grades or fixed a fence for her. Jake cracked a grin. At least you blew it all up before the cake was served. Small mercies. Ethan snorted. Yeah, small mercies. He sipped the beer, warm now, but he didn't care, and let the silence sit with him a little longer. Jake broke it with a soft punch to Ethan's shoulder. You know, you always were too good for her. You loved her more than she ever deserved. Ethan looked at his best friend and realized it was true, and it hurt less to hear it than he thought it would. I don't want to be angry forever, Ethan said. Good, Jake said, standing up. Then don't be. Be better. Build something else. She doesn't get the last word. He reached out a hand. Ethan took it, let Jake haul him off the couch. Come on, Jake said, nodding toward the kitchen. I'm making coffee. Real coffee, not wedding day swill. Ethan managed a real smile. Yeah, okay. In that moment, standing barefoot in the morning sun of his best friend's tiny kitchen, Ethan knew something for certain. He lost Rachel, but he'd kept himself, and maybe that was the only vow that ever mattered. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter while Jake rattled around with mugs, and the ancient coffee machine sputtered to life. The smell of strong brew cut through the leftover taste of stale beer and burned betrayal. A small mercy he didn't know he'd needed. Jake poured 2 mugs and handed one over. So, he said, sliding into a chair across the kitchen table. What's the plan, man? You gonna vanish into the woods? Backpack Europe? Shave your head and join a monastery? Ethan chuckled, the first real laugh since he'd stood alone on that dock. He sipped the coffee, wincing at the heat, but grateful for it. I don't know. Part of me wants to disappear for a while. But I think I want my life back. My real one. Not the version that only made sense with her in it. Jake nodded slowly. You still have the shop? Yeah, Ethan said. Rachel didn't want her name anywhere near the car lot. Too dirty for her brand, I guess. Jake whistled. Good. That's yours, man. That's something solid. Ethan thought about the dusty garage bay, the old muscle cars he'd planned to fix up in the evenings while Rachel scrolled her phone in the living room. Maybe now, that dream could belong only to him. No half-lies muttered in the doorway, no secrets stashed behind his back. He pulled out his phone, scrolled past the unread messages until he found the one from his bank app. The one that proved the account was still his, untouched by her or Brandon's greasy fingers. Small blessings. Small mercies. I'll start there, Ethan said, more to himself than Jake. Clean it up. Fix the Mustang. Keep busy. Good, Jake said, lifting his mug like a toast. You keep your hands dirty, your head clear. Don't let her rent space up here. He tapped his temple. She's out. Keep her out. Ethan raised his mug, clinked it against Jake's. Yeah, no more ghosts. They drank in silence for a minute. The only sound the hum of the old fridge and the coffee maker dripping its last tired drops. When Ethan stood to leave, Jake clapped him on the shoulder again. Hey, I mean it. If you need anything, you know where to find me. I know, Ethan said, and he did. As he stepped outside into the new morning, the sun low and bright and blinding, Ethan felt it, the shift inside, the promise that even broken vows can't ruin the one thing that matters most. The man who keeps standing after they're shattered. Ethan drove away from Jake's place with the window rolled down, the breeze carrying away the last stale taste of the wedding that wasn't. He let the radio hum some old song he didn't even recognize. It didn't matter. All that mattered was the road ahead. When he reached the car lot, the sign creaked in the morning wind, Harper's Auto in detail. His father's name still ghosted the wooden board, faded but strong. Ethan traced the letters with his eyes, felt the weight of that legacy settle on his shoulders like a warm coat instead of a chain. He unlocked the gate and stepped inside. The gravel crunched under his feet, weeds pushing through the cracks. The place looked rough, half forgotten after months spent planning wedding flowers and guest lists instead of oil changes and restoration jobs. But it was his mess to clean, his dream to rebuild. He opened the bay door and stood for a moment, taking in the sight of his old '67 Mustang under its dusty tarp. He pulled the cover off, let the daylight spill across rust and steel and old promises he hadn't broken, promises he'd just misplaced. His phone buzzed again. This time he didn't even look. He powered it off and dropped it on the workbench. Enough noise. Enough ghosts. Ethan grabbed a wrench, rolled up his sleeves, and popped the hood. For the first time in weeks, his mind didn't spiral. His hands knew what to do. Unbolt, clean, rebuild, repeat. Each turn of the wrench scraped away pieces of Rachel's betrayal. Each fleck of oil under his fingernails replaced the bitter taste of Brandon's smug grin. Hours passed. The sun climbed, sweat beading at his hairline. But Ethan kept at it. Metal and grease, muscle and grit. He didn't need forgiveness from Rachel or revenge on Brandon. He only needed this, proof that not everything good rusts away. When he finally stepped back, knuckles scraped raw and oil streaking his arms, the Mustang sat there looking almost alive again. Not perfect, not yet, but closer. He wiped his hands on an old rag and looked around the garage. Quiet, honest, his. He took a breath, and for the first time since he'd found that damning text, he felt it. Freedom. He didn't get the wedding, the perfect story, the life they promised. But he got the truth, and that was enough. So he locked up the lot, climbed into his old truck, and turned the ignition. As the engine rumbled awake, Ethan looked at the rising sun and allowed himself the smallest smile. Some vows break, some people break, but some men, they don't. If you felt this story hit deep, hit that like button, subscribe for more raw, true-style twists, and comment your thoughts below. Every story here is for you. Real, messy, unforgettable. See you in the next one.